And welcome everyone to Sports Talk Line, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. Today for Battle of the Big East, we got from Big East Coast Bias, Chris Novak. How you doing today, Chris?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited for whatever this college basketball season brings us. I know it's obviously been a wild and crazy year, but it'll be nice to see whatever happens here. And obviously, this is another year in the, I guess not even, you can't even really call it new Big East anymore. It's what it is at this point.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, you got an old member coming back in UConn. Villanova's still up top of the Big East, so as crazy as 2020 is, that's at least one constant. But one team I really want to focus on is Marquette. They're losing Marcus Howard, who could put up 40s, 50s, sometimes even more points per game. He's ran out of eligibility. But one interesting thing I see about Marquette is out of their returners, do you think Theo John and Koby Mcewen can become all-conference players in the Big East?
I think it's certainly possible that both of them could step up. Mcewen was a significant contributor last year for them in terms of possessions, and Theo John was a solid role player for them. I think the key for Mcewen is for him to reform back to his Utah State performances, and because he kind of took a step back in terms of his efficiency last year. His numbers for both his 2-point and 3-point percentages were both down from there. He still had solid assist numbers and was decent enough as a rebounder. But I think considering the loss of Marcus Howard, they'll obviously need somebody to step up in terms of both shooting and efficiency, because obviously Howard was an incredible player in both those categories. John, meanwhile, I think it's about just staying consistent. He's always been a solid player in terms of, producing those 2-point baskets for them, being a presence down low. Last year, he shot 54.9% from the field and 58.9% against Big East teams and whatnot. Down only slightly from his numbers as a sophomore. So for his senior year, I think he'll look to just kind of finish strong. I think because of the conference and how it's composed, I think John definitely has more of a better possibility of making an all-conference team versus Mcewen, but I think both definitely have the potential to do it.
Okay, and you kind of mentioned before how Mcewen transferred in. Marquette is benefiting from the transfer waivers that are flying. DJ Carton came in from Ohio State, averaged 10 points a game in the Big Ten. So that's kind of something to look at in 2020, 2021 for Marquette. How do you see Carton playing a role for Marquette?
Well, I think if nothing else for Carton, he's going to add depth to the guard position. Guard is a position group that Marquette right now is pretty loaded at, between him, Mcewen, Samir Torrance, Dexter Acano, and Greg Elliott as well. Will all be in the rotation. And without Marcus Howard around, they'll definitely need plenty of help and plenty of guards to kind of complement and try and replace whatever scoring capabilities that he was able to add to the team. And Carton, he gave solid contributions. You noted that he averaged 10 points per game in his only year with Ohio State. Played 20 games, 3 starts. His field goal percentages were all pretty good. 3-point shooting was 40%. Only took 3 attempts per game, and that's not too bad or whatever. So I think if nothing else, like I said, Carton will definitely be a good depth piece, if nothing else.
Yeah. Now, one player who I think is the most interesting to see out of any of the newcomers in the Big East is Dawson Garcia. 6'11", 235. He was preseason freshman of the year for the Big East. Will he be a difference maker for Marquette?
Yeah, I mean, you had noted it yourself. He was a preseason Big East freshman of the year, rather. And it's easy to see why. You look at his recruiting rankings. He was ranked in the top 40, number 2 player in the state of Minnesota. That behind the likes of, whoever was at the top there. 24/7 Sports wasn't loading for me for a second there. My bad. But Garcia obviously coming in with a lot of good hype. And if nothing else, it's sort of the opposite in the sense of what we were talking about with Carton with the guards. Garcia is going to get a lot of reps because Marquette is a little bit thin at forward right now. Besides him and the aforementioned Theo John, and they've never really been kind of shy about letting freshmen get run at Marquette with how Wojo plays his cards that he's dealt. Specifically going back to, the likes of Henry Ellenson when he was there a couple of years ago. So I think he's going to be able to make a big impact in year one, especially if he is the player that they say that he is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Now, another team to look at too that also had lost a lot of players to the draft and basically graduation. We have Butler. Kamar Baldwin was the closer for Butler. He's graduated. Jordan Tucker decided to look at pro possibilities. But Butler does return Bryce Nze. And, he was, big preseason conference player. How do you see him, or is he enough to make Butler a contender in the Big East?
Well, he himself had a really, really good 2019-2020 season. He was one of the best shooters in the entire Big East, predominantly inside. He only took five 3-point shots all season, but he was still able to, put up points in bunches inside. And, he was a solid rebounder and a solid shot blocker as well. He'll obviously be the go-to guy for Butler, like you mentioned. They lost so much to graduation and just, departures with Jordan Tucker going pro and Baldwin and, Sean McDermott and Henry Badley, all key contributors over the last couple of years. They're all gone. Whether or not he's going to be enough, I think depends on, how the likes of Aaron Thompson and, Bryce Golden play. And, wherever they're able to get other contributions from, whether it's a Christian David or whoever else that they decide to try out there.
Now, you mentioned Aaron Thompson. He's the guard with the most experience for Butler coming back. Do you see him being the leader in the backcourt for Butler?
I think if he's going to do that, he's going to, go back to what he was a couple of years ago. Last season, he took a little bit of a step back from how he performed as a sophomore. His efficiency went down quite a bit. His assist rate went down only slightly, so he was still able to, make plays and, be a playmaker for them whenever he was able to get reps. And his shooting really went down. So if Thompson can be, a better shooter this year, then I think that he's going to definitely be able to lead that backcourt. It really all depends on how he performs at that level.
All right, and also I feel like when you look at Butler, they win on the defensive end, especially with all the losses that they had offensively. Do you think Butler will get enough offense to be a threat in the Big East?
I am inclined, just based on trends and based on how they've performed over the years, to say yes. The last couple of years, they've been very strong offensively, and especially in terms of their adjusted offensive efficiency, which is a stat, of course, that kind of tracks points per 100 possessions with adjustment over on KenPom. And they've never really finished outside of anywhere in the top 75. And under LaVall Jordan, his first year there, they finished 22nd. And then last year, they took a step back. They finished 53rd, which is still pretty solid. So, we'll need to, and, last year also, they were actually 25th. I was looking for the wrong thing. But, if the trends are to be what they are, then I would say yes. But this is definitely a different team, and they'll need to get contributions from guys, like I said, in Thompson, in terms of, in Bryce Nze keeping his, performances up well. And I think it's really all dependent on that. But I would probably lean yes, just based on their track record, what it speaks for them.
Yeah. And Butler, if they play enough defense, I think that'll give them a chance in most games. It's just you got to worry about their offense. But someone else, I think another intriguing team in the Big East over the last few years has been DePaul. A lot of people have always picked them. All right, they're finally going to make it out of the basement. They're finally going to make it out of the basement, and they haven't. Do you see in 2020, 2021, the Blue Demons getting out of the basement of the Big East?
I would like to believe that they would. They have a good amount of experience coming back. There's still a good amount of talent even without Paul Reed, who will probably be hearing his name called in the NBA draft. It really is just, for me, it's two things. One, can they get past their lack of depth down low? Right now, they only have 3 scholarship players at the forward and center position. And, I think also it's just kind of what you said, can they get through their own reputation that they've built up over the past few years, where it seems like there's reason to believe, it seems like there's hope, it seems like there's talent, but they can't ever quite put it together. This is a team that last year, they went 3-15 in Big East play. The year before that, they went 7-11, which, obviously, so last year was a step back from a market improvement in that category. And then, the year before that, they went 4-14. And, they've had talented players come through there, as evident by Paul Reed more than likely getting drafted this year, but they still weren't able to, get it all together. So I think it's overcoming their own personal demons as a team, no pun intended, of course. But will they be able to do that? I would like to believe yes, but I've thought that for the past couple of years too, and they haven't put it together.
I feel like DePaul is one of the teams where a lot of people were like, hey, they're going to break through, and then they're like, nah, we given you a shot so many times until you break our hearts. But I think the key thing for DePaul will be getting that first conference win. If they get that first conference win, because they were close in a lot of games and, they weren't able to close out. So that could be little tweaks that could improve DePaul, but we'll see, even though the expectation really isn't there. But one of the players who kind of got caught up in a little bit of controversy, even though he really didn't do anything for DePaul, was Charlie Moore was named to the first team preseason All-Big East team. A lot of people thought that accolade deserved more to James Boatnight out of UConn. Do you think Charlie Moore deserved to be a preseason All-Big East player? First team.
I think he was pretty rock solid last year, and he did a lot of things right. But I will say that if there was anything you're going to knock him for, it would be his efficiency. He wasn't the best shooter, and you mentioned Boatnight from Connecticut, and he certainly was pretty good last year. He shot the ball much better. He played, a little bit better on both ends, I think. But I guess I can kind of see what they were going for, just because he is a senior, and they probably felt that, they didn't want to not include him on there, since they did have, they had a few seniors on the second team with Bryce Nze and Mitch Ballack and Nate Watson and Paul Scruggs as well. Maybe they wanted to give one honor to another senior, since, there's Charlie Moore, then Mamu from Seton Hall, and Colin Gillespie from Villanova. And, maybe feeling like, Boatnight needed to quote unquote earn it. But yeah, I can see the argument for both players.
I totally agree. Charlie Moore seems like a great point guard, but I think his shooting numbers could have been better.
Yes.
And also too, if DePaul had more wins, I think that would have helped him out going forward. But, speaking of forwards, you mentioned DePaul could be thin at the forward spot, but no, I really do like their 2 forwards of Romeo Weems and Jaylen Butz. So who do you think will have a better season, Weems or Butz?
It is. I think Butz might have higher numbers because he might get more minutes, because Weems is going to be playing more on the wing. But Weems might be the better player, especially if he can improve on his 3-point shooting, and also, his shot blocking last year and his steal percentages were both really, really good. So I think, maybe at the year's end, you see Butz, having maybe more points and more opportunities, but I do think that I like Weems just a little bit more to play really well as a sophomore.
And speaking of likes, right now will be the time, if you haven't done so already, click that subscribe button on YouTube to Sports Talk Line, where you can see Battle for the Big East and all our basketball highlights for the Big East and NBA action. But now, another team which I think is going to be the surprise team in the Big East, which no one is really talking about, is Xavier. Do you think Xavier will be the surprise team in the Big East? Or, Chris, do you have another team you think that will be the surprise team in the Big East?
Xavier was picked 7th in the conference this year. But my feeling with Xavier, yes, they've had some down years over the past couple of seasons with Travis Steele. They haven't really been able to, get to where they were with Chris Mack at the helm, but you can't ever really count them out. they have built up a really good winning tradition over in Cincinnati over the past 2 or 3 decades or so. And so I think that, like I said, while they've had their down years, they had 19 wins in each. We'll never quite know what would have happened last year. Maybe they would have gotten into a playing game in Dayton with how they performed, and they lost their first Big East tournament game. But I think it really will depend on how their seniors play. And if they're seniors and their transfers that are coming in, if they can all play really well, then I think that they can surprise them.
You mentioned their seniors, and the senior that stands out the most on Xavier is Paul Scruggs. Do you see him being, because I see him on Xavier right now, he's going to be their closer for him. We mentioned how Butler had Kamar Baldwin. Do you see Paul Scruggs being the best closer in the Big East? Someone who basically the last 2 minutes of the game can take over offensively and get the buckets your team needs?
He's obviously a guy who's seen a lot. He's been there forever. He's a senior. He was an all Big East second team selection, like he had said before. I think he can potentially be the best closer. Yeah. There's quite a few capable players. I think Marcus Zagorowski at Creighton, the Big East preseason player of the year, is one of them. I think, you look at a guy like Gillespie at Villanova, who's also been there forever. Maybe Jeremiah Robinson Earl has that ability to, close out down the stretch. But I do think Scruggs definitely has it in him to pull that off and have that on. Yes.
And also, we mentioned, Xavier also, I think they had a pretty solid recruiting class, and they know the type of players to get. Even though Chris Mack is at Louisville, Travis Steele, they want to get those big, strong guards, and one of the guys they got was CJ Wilshire. Do you see him adding, some key buckets and being an offensive threat for the Musketeers in this upcoming season?
I kind of do. Wilshire obviously comes in. He's top 125 player in America out of Roselle Catholic out in New Jersey. He was a top 10 player, top 10 recruit in the state of New Jersey. And they won't typically shy away from using their freshmen in some role. You saw last year they were able to get a lot out of the likes of Zach Fremantle. And, they were able to also use Kiki Tandy as well, who I think is going to, perform really well as a sophomore too this year. So I think he'll definitely get his opportunities if he's progressing along as we think that he will. So yes, I do think he's going to be a pretty solid contributor for them as a freshman.
And now someone else who we're trying to figure out is going to be solid in the upcoming season is Georgetown. Patrick Ewing came in a few years ago. You thought he was kind of turning things around. All right, Georgetown was hovering around 500, but the middle of last season, they had some players have to transfer in the middle of the season over whether it's playing time or off the court issues. And then Mac McClung decides to transfer to Texas Tech. And you got to wonder, with, the inability to get winning records and also having players transfer, is Georgetown heading in the right direction?
Well, everything you just mentioned, in the immortal words of former Yankees manager and current Phillies manager Joe Girardi, it's not what you want. They had some upward regression 2 seasons ago when they won 19 games after winning 15 in Ewing's first year. But then, they had everything kind of fall apart. And, last year, like a house of cards, they had everyone transfer. They, had some other issues and whatnot with just, overall play. They went back down to 15 wins again. So I think year 4 is going to be crucial for them. If they're able to, get back to where I don't think at this point, I think while expectations might still be where they are for Georgetown, where, America thinks Georgetown should be, if they can get back to, where they were 2 seasons ago, then I think that things will level up. But if they're back to hovering around the 15-16 win mark, then there's going to be some heat under Patrick Ewing's seat, which I think is really unfortunate because for a long while there were a lot of people who thought that he should be a head coach. And, I think I think that he's still doing a lot of good things. It just might be, kind of the hand that he's been dealt. And, some situations that have, arisen there have kind of made this just a pretty unfortunate situation.
Yeah, I totally think, Patrick Ewing, he was not one of these NBA superstars who just walks into a head coaching job. He paid his dues. He was an assistant coach for over 10 plus years. He brought in Louis Orr, who used to be the head coach at Seton Hall several years ago. And it seems like he knows the game. He has a strong recruiting class coming in. Will it being led by Ryan Mutombo? Yes, his father's Dikembe. But let's focus on the players he's got this year. Two players who I think who stand out, who need to lead the Hoyas this upcoming season, is Javon Blair and Jamaro Pinkett. Do you think they can keep the Hoyas respectable?
Yeah, I do, and I think they'll definitely have to have bigger roles on this team given the departures and whatnot, and they'll just simply have to play better than they were last year. Blair, his shooting numbers were just okay. He's the more deeper analytics had him. His effective field goal percentage was under 50%, and his true shooting percentage was just right at 50.1. Pickett, meanwhile, sort of the same. Both numbers were under 50%. So if they're going to be relying on them, I think they need to be, better shooters and better scorers and whatnot for this team, especially like we said, with all the departures that they've had to deal with and all the other things. They're not going to have McClung around anymore to, be a guy who can be a go-to guy for them. So if they want, I think that, they're going to be relied upon, especially considering that both of them are seniors now. They're going to be the guys who Georgetown is going to be, leaning on in these games, in these crucial situations, late in games and whatnot. If they need, to get a rally, they're going to be looking to Blair and Pickett to, step up and play well. So I think that's really just what it comes down to. They're going to be given bigger roles, and they just need to play better than how they fared a season ago.
Mm-hmm. All right, Chris, I want to thank you for coming on the show. If you want to, you can tell people where to find you on Twitter.
Yeah, sure. You can follow me on Twitter at Chris M. Novak, CHRIS, the letter M as in Michael, which is my middle name, and Novak, Novak. And then, of course, you can follow Big East Coast Bias on Twitter at BECB_SBN. All
right. Thanks for coming on, Chris. Thanks for everyone to watching. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button and listen and watch like you play with intensity.